Hello and welcome to another Terminator episode of Lazy Reviews. Today, digging into the video game Terminator Resistance from 2019. There's not a whole lot to unpack with this game and I could easily spend all day here, but I don't really want to. I'll instead focus on the most important aspects of the game and I will be dissecting the video into following sections. I'll first give a quick introduction to the story of the game, the lore, the setting. I will then talk about the gameplay mechanics, and I will then dive into how the game functions, how the story functions in the broader scheme of the Terminator franchise, how it ties into and how it plays with, well, the movies of the franchise, how it figures into all of that. And I will then end it on some of the more technical aspects. So if you're not interested in everything here, you can just use the timestamp to the video to jump to the section you want to hear about. But let's get started with the story.
What a story, Mark.
This game takes place in the dystopian future, the post-apocalypse, post-Judgment Day future seen in Terminator 1 and 2. And the game opens up in medias res. You are in LA in 2028. Your community is under attack by Skynet. And you're immediately rescued by a stranger who contacts you over your communication system and gives you all the instructions you need to make it out of this community alive. Surviving this onslaught on this Pasadena community, you, a lovely private, need to find your way back to regroup with the rest of the resistance. And along this way, you'll meet several survivors. You'll create your own little community. You can, should you choose to finish the quests, and depending on some of the decisions you make, you will stay engaged with this community, help some people, build some strong bonds with these people, and eventually link up with the resistance and take the fight to Skynet. And of course, all the while, there is this mysterious guy that you're trying to figure out who the hell is he, because he keeps rescuing your ass. And he keeps telling you things he really shouldn't know. And that's the main story of the game. It all takes place in and around LA in 2028, going into 2029, where the first movie starts in the future. And saying more than I already have would risk spoiling it, although the story is incredibly straightforward. It's not complex in any positive sense of the word. Whatever is convoluted about it are only plot contrivances to drive out the story, to make it progress much further than it should. And you do have some decent dynamics with some of the side characters that I will not really go into either. It's not really relevant for my review, but there are some good aspects there with some of those stories. And much of the story and the world building also depends on how much you explore. You will not get that much if you only complete the main quest and don't really explore these open areas. Whenever you get to a new area, it is quite open. There will be certain paths you can take. It will be open to exploration where you can come across nodes and other means of exploring the universe you're in, the stories you're in, both with the characters you meet and some set dressing you come across. Just know you shouldn't expect the story to be Citizen Kane and you'll probably be all right. The story itself is what it needs to be a game set in the Terminator future. Pretty much. They could do different things with it, but from a story perspective, there really isn't a big issue. But that's why we should talk about the gameplay.
Whatever it is that you think is so important that you need to tell me, don't.
Terminator Resistance is an action-packed shooter with RPG elements, though very low-key RPG elements, in a minusculely open world. The areas you're in, you can move around and explore a bit, but there are only very few certain paths you can take, with side objectives, side tasks you can accomplish if you so want to, but it's not really swimming in them. It's what you would expect from a lot of games these days. There are very few linear shooters. I mean, we have seen the comeback of the boomer shooter, and this is not really in it. It feels much more like it got its core gameplay mechanics from 2010, 2015. And talking about the gameplay and the dated aspects of the gameplay, there's one very important word to use: slapjank. The game is made by the Polish developer Teyon that doesn't really seem to have the best reputation, the best history with making games, especially first-person shooters, and it shows. When I say slapjank, especially in the context of 2019 and Poland, I do want to stress that there are a lot of good, very well-polished games coming out of Poland, both at this time and today. I don't want to use this term as a derogatory term for Polish gaming industry or for the Slavic gaming industry or Central and Eastern European gaming industry, but I do want to use the word here as it is extremely fitting for what this game has to offer. This game is not polished. This game is not smooth. This game is really not designed as a modern shooter. It has the mechanics of a B-tier target first-person shooter you could find in 2007, 2012 with a few more modern elements added to the mix. It really doesn't work as a game from 2019, and some of these things I'll talk about when I talk about the graphics and the sound design, but the game just feels cheap. The movement is stiff. Combat is boring. It's stiff and boring, and there's a lot of different issues with it that can really be boiled down to enemies being bullet sponges. In the early game, you have very little ammo, and it can really feel like a fight for survival, which itself is not bad, but it does become bad when you realize that the stealth mechanics are practically non-existent. You have these skill points so you can boost certain aspects of your character. I don't think there's a big reason to invest in stealth because there are so many things that are more important early in the game, such as lock picking. Yeah, you can prioritize stealth, even even then, stealth is still not great. I did boost my stealth because at the end I could just dump the rest of my points into whatever I wanted them. And even then, stealth is not great, especially when you add in all the issues, all the glitches of the game. So the early mid gameplay is characterized by having very few resources and having no real alternatives, as stealth is not really an option. I will also want to tell you, I think I played it on normal. I didn't even play it on hard. And even then, the enemies are just bullet sponges. It does give you a fairly big roster of enemies, nothing too crazy, but it does give you a lot of different Terminator models, and it gives you a lot of different auxiliary units like scouts and that sort of thing. And an aspect where it does function is that the different weapons are good for different things. So it's that sort of thing. What is the term you use? You need the right kind of can opener for the job. I know that's not what you say, but I just forgot the correct terminology for it here. And that actually does sort of work, at least on paper. A bit later, you'll just have lasers for everything. So when you have the plasma weapons, it doesn't really matter anymore. But early on, it does function a bit, and there are enemy weak points. So there are aspects of the game that does function. I will not really cheer it on for that. I will not really compliment it on it because that's just the bare minimum. But it did make ways to make the gaming and to make the resource management a bit more manageable, especially if you're good enough. But it doesn't really take away from the fact that these enemies are just bullet sponges. And later in the game, it becomes so obvious that the enemies are stupid. They are stiff robots. They are the Terminator models you've seen in the movies. So there is a limit to what they can do with them. But their movements are stiff. They are stupid. They will lose sense of you after a few seconds and stop pursuing you. There are a few places in the game that really are focused on stealth and sneaking up on them. It can be really frustrating because the movements, the paths, they're often patrolling. It can be quite difficult to understand exactly when they will move and how they will move. It's often just trial and error. You don't really feel rewarded for when you get things right. You just feel lucky. There are some things that are a learning curve, but a lot of it just feels more like luck, especially these frustrating places where it's focusing a lot of the stealth, where sneaking up on them is not really easy to do at all, and it's not fun either. And the problem is then that the only way that the developers figured they could make the game anyway challenging and progressively challenging as you get better and better weapons is by giving the enemies more and more health and more firepower. That's why the game can be incredibly frustrating, because with a lot of weapons, even if you shoot them in the head, it can still take multiple magazines to just down one Terminator. And sometimes you are in apartment buildings or houses and you will be surrounded by multiple models, and they may be able to kill you fully dead in 5 shots, 4, 5, 6 shots, depending on how you have spec'd your character. And it feels punishing, but not in the right way. When you have bullet sponge enemies that are just dealing too much damage, you can just outsmart them usually. If you're not in a confined quarter, you can just run around them. But then there will be other enemies that find and spot you instantaneously and kill you. And yeah, it's just not a fun way to develop a difficulty curve. And also just the way the shooting mechanics and everything works. It's not fun to destroy the models, and it's not fun to run from them. It's not fun to hide from them. It's not fun fighting them at all. There's no fun in the combat. And what makes it worse are the glitches. There are so many issues with the combat here. I often found that the Terminator units, that Skynet's units, could shoot through surfaces. So you might think you're in cover, but you'll be shut down anyway. You really need to take cover in this game because, as I said, sometimes depending on the unit you're fighting, 3 to 6 shots will get you killed at full health. And there might be 6 enemies sometimes you face at the same time. So you really need cover. You really need these things to work. And the cover mechanics will not work. The throwing mechanics, you have grenades you can throw. That sucks. It's one of the worst throwing mechanics I've seen. Like the way your character throws the object compared to how you aim. It's just like it's flinging things like all over the place. It's not working. I made a lot of mistakes trying to throw the grenades, to throw the sticky bombs, because they're just flying all over the place and I was often risking killing myself instead of killing the enemy. It's not the worst game I've experienced with the throwing mechanics, but it is one of them. It really isn't fun to throw grenades, but you pretty much have to because it's one of the best ways to kill Skynet's units. Another problem I found, it did happen more rarely, but it did happen, is that it's one of those games where you have invisible surfaces. So you might think you can shoot an enemy, spending a lot of ammo. As I said, ammo is limited. You're spending a lot of ammo just looking at them and not understanding why they're not hit. And that's because there might be, 30, 40 centimeters of free air that you try to shoot through, but for some reason the game thinks there's an object there, so you will not shoot them. And in some of these cases, the enemy can actually shoot at you while you cannot shoot at them. So that's also quite fun. It's also a game without proper manual saves or free manual saves, as you please. I know that a lot of people don't really like quick saving everything because you can quick scum it. The problem is with this game that the saving system sucks. it glitches. There were several times where I could not load a save, where no matter what I tried to do, it loaded the wrong save. And then I found times where the autosaves and the manual saves you save with these computers, they didn't work. And finally, the third problem with the save system is that it often catalogs them incorrectly, so will catalog the wrong time for them. So sometimes to get the save you actually want to load, you need to take the 5th most recent save. Or sometimes, you need to load one save and only then can you load the correct save. It's just not polished.
I'm having a good time. Not.
The hitbox can be terrible. Sometimes you're shooting at something that's pretty much straight in front of you and you're still not hitting it, even though you really should hit it. If you film it, you can see yourself having no obstructions in the way of hitting the target that's, as I said, probably only a few centimeters away, yet you do not hit it. Like these really, really bad hitboxes. All the while, again, the enemy can hit you all the time and will kill you very quickly. It does help that a lot of levels have resistance units fighting on your side that are unkillable and that will draw damage from the enemies, that will draw fire from the enemies. So that does give you a bit of a breather to fight back. And once you again have the sniper rifle and some of the later stage weapons, most fights become incredibly easy, although you can still be very easily killed. There is much more I could say about the gameplay, like the skill system, the character decisions and everything, but it doesn't really matter that much. And I'd rather talk about some of the very big issues with the lore of the game, but I want to mention one last thing about the gameplay. It is equally hilarious and terrible that the hacking minigame is Frogger. It is quite faithful to some extent to the world that the Judgment Day, the nuclear apocalypse came in 1997, so they would have had more minimalistic technology than they would have, of course, normally in 2028, 29. That being said, the hacking minigame, yes, it's Frogger, but even then the technology looks like something designed for the first movie in 1984 or even earlier, like really old Atari systems, not something for 1997. So even then you could argue they could have done something different. It doesn't need to have this very retro futuristic look. But that's not the big issue with this. I really hope you like playing Frogger because you'll do it a lot. It is the hacking minigame and you can hack a lot of things, including turrets that are almost impossible to kill, but that will be very good for you to destroy robots. So you will find yourself hacking everything. You'll hack your way past doors, you'll hack boxes open, you'll do a lot of hacking in this game. So I really hope you like this minigame because you might be playing it every few minutes. A bit like I think it was in one of the Bioshocks, Bioshock Infinity, where it was such a good idea to pretty much hack everything you came across, just meaning you would hack all the time. There's another game, I just forgot which one, where I had the same issue with it, where you're just constantly hacking. It's not fun, but if you don't do it, you'll be locked out of a lot of bonuses, so you pretty much do feel forced to do it. You're just forced to do a lot of things that are not funny. I think it was Prey where I had that issue with as well. But let's talk about something else in the gameplay, because yes, that department is really bad. It's rudimentary Slav jank that was made 10 years late. At the bare minimum, it's okay, but there's so many better games out there, so you shouldn't just settle for bare minimum rudimentary gameplay.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
But it's not the only issue. Let's talk about the lore and how it ties into the broader Terminator universe. So the timeline or the parallel universe that the game is set in is for Terminator 1 and 2, which I think is quite decent. They're generally only the two real beloved movies, so it makes sense to continue from their universe, especially because their depiction of the universe was quite fantastic, very visually interesting, very eerie and dark in ways that Terminator Salvation certainly didn't capture. It was a very, very different, very bad future compared to what you get in the first two films. So that's a good decision. It's also an interesting choice that it takes place in the very late stage resistance. So if you watch the first films, you're told that in 2029, when we see the future taking place, the humans are actually about to win, but that's when Skynet finalizes its time traveling technology and sends Terminators back to avoid this timeline from happening, to secure the victory in the future. That means that in the game, you are at the very end of the resistance, but at the same time, yes, you will be taking on Skynet, but you get to see humanity going from almost near extinction to victory. Again, not a bad idea. It is interesting to see the humans winning the war, but I think an issue here is that they cannot really live up to that scale. The problem is when you are creating something that hitherto was only in people's minds, all these things that we had been building up in our mind, what was this final moment, like these final battles between humans and Skynet like. The problem is when you translate that to a game like this, it's incredibly underwhelming. There's very few humans very easily taking on huge Skynet machines in a final battle. It's really not that interesting at all. The world you witness is a tiny resistance resistance movement, fighting what still seems to be an overwhelming enemy, somehow still taking it on because humans can't die, like your companions can't die. The way they're fighting these machines, you understand why the humans would be losing the war, and it never really feels believable because you're tasked with doing the main things. You're tasked with taking down their central computer, where if that's destroyed, the theory is that all Skynet units will go offline. That is sort of the idea. I think it is also what was established in the first or the second film, that's how the humans won the war. At least it's hinted at that that's how they would win the war. The problem is when you're the one doing it, and you're doing it with a squad of 10 resistance members, maybe aiding 10 more resistance members, it's such a small scale. It feels so underwhelming. I think they would have been better off with you playing a minor role. So not leading the main assault, but maybe leading diversion attack on some other facility. So it makes sense that they cannot create the whole scale. It would make sense that you are not trying to operate one of the major chapters of the resistance, but rather one of the very small auxiliary chapters, which sort of is the case, but then again, not really the way the game plays out. The resistance movement seems too small, too fractured, to present a comprehensive force that can actually win. I think they could have solved that problem in so many ways, but just not the way they decided to do it. But that's not really the most important aspect of this, really, because that's just a bit more nitpicking, that the scale of it, that you actually get to see how they win, but not really believe it when you see it. I don't think that is the worst aspects of it. There are some much worse ways they treat Skynet. So I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think the first and the second film says that the entire world is destroyed aside from LA. Terminator Salvation certainly doesn't believe that. They believe Skynet is everywhere. And if I remember correctly, the first Terminator film does say that all of humanity was rounded up by Skynet and lived in these concentration camps. In this game, from how it's presented, Skynet is only in LA and all the rest of humanity is only in LA. There's nothing outside LA. There are no Skynet units outside LA. Once LA is over, it's done. The resistance is only present in LA, not in anywhere else in the world. The game could have built to something like, okay, the resistance is everywhere, humanity is everywhere. Some scattered Skynet units and Skynet outposts and units are operating all around the world, but we just need to take them down in LA, like the central core, and then it will all go offline. That would have worked. But no, the way the game presents it is that it's all in LA, nothing else. That's such a silly world building, especially when you compound how the nuclear apocalypse doesn't really seem that bad. You're walking around driving forests, something you saw in Terminator Salvation as well. You don't really believe that the entire world has ended. But even though it's only taking place 30 years after the apocalypse in LA, there are still safe havens. Why would Skynet not have consolidated power in LA? I understand that the resistance movement might be fighting the back, but we have communities of people not in the resistance, just humans keeping a low profile and living in LA. There are just so many aspects of this world building that don't really make sense. You don't understand how 30 years could have passed in this world. That's not presented to you in a believable way. You also don't understand how the rest of the world can just be gone and just be treated as non-existent. And how the resistance, as how it's presented in the game, are only 2 or 3 chapters left against all of Skynet that supposedly has all the world's resources at its disposal. Even diminished resources after apocalypse, but nonetheless resources. It doesn't work well with what we are told in the first 2 films. It really doesn't work well with that. But aside from the flaws in how it operates within the Terminator franchise, it also has just a lot of glaring issues with its own world building. For example, at one point you're infiltrating a hospital where Skynet is experimenting on humans. I'm not gonna say why. If you want to play the game, I don't want to spoil that aspect of it, but they are experimenting on humans. And in doing so, a lot of humans die. And Skynet decides to put them all in body bags. You come into rooms that are completely littered with body bags. In the rest of the game, you see a lot of body bags. Why would Skynet bother wasting resources on body bags? Is it easier for Terminator models to transport people around in body bags? The way they're presented in the game doesn't really seem like it's easy for them to do any kind of manual labor. Why would they go through the effort of putting people in body bags? But not just that. In this hospital, you come across a member of the Resistance who, in his holding cell, is having full military equipment on, including a headset that is very, very big, very visible on his head. Why did Skynet permit the member of the Resistance to have this in his holding cell? It makes no sense. And no, it's not like a secret trap that they're allowed to have him there. So let's quickly go into the technical aspects of the game before a conclusion, a wrap-up. The graphics are not bad, but they're not great either. It's very basic. It's very much what you would expect for this type of game, for this type of slothjank game. A bit more polished with the graphics, but nothing that really feels worth celebrating. But one aspect of the graphics is worse than everything else, and that is the acting, both the actual people acting and the expressions in people's faces. This game feels very much like the indie game Forgotten City in terms of how the characters look very stiff, very unanimated when they are acting when you're communicating with them feels like it should be better for a game for 2019. It feels again like it's from the late 2000s or early 2010s. And so many of the performances are just very stiff or very bland or very over the top, but not in a good way. The sort of thing you would expect from a bad action movie where you don't need to do that for Terminator.
People died there because of you. And what did you do about it? Did you pick up a gun and fight back? Or did you run like you sewer rats always do?
I think a problem is also with the script people are given. It is really the most bare bone of character development. It is the most basic. It is just textbook, doing it everything by the books. The dialogue is not good. The story is not good. The acting just is like the final nail in the coffin, that even with all these things lacking, the acting could maybe be saving grace, but it's not. It's not terrible. It's just not good in any sense of the word. This game has 2 sex scenes that make me question if these people ever had sex. Especially one of them, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It almost feels like watching The Room. I probably can't share much of it here, but it's just very odd movements, odd sounds. It's all of this game feels like it's the first draft, and it doesn't feel like they had any time to polish it or to flesh out the story in any better way, to give them any better dialogue, to make the movements less stiff or anything. It's just not good. And the final thing I wanted to say about this technical side, the sound design. They didn't even get the sound design right. The first time you hear their somewhat re-rendered, re-edited version of the Terminator 2 theme, it kind of slaps. You get in the mood. But when you realize very early that this game only has 1 or 2 songs to offer, namely the same 1 or 2 renditions of the Terminator theme, it gets so stale so quickly, and you just want it to end. By the end of the game, the 100th time I'd heard it, I was so fed up with it. Again, so cheap. Everything about this game is cheap. Everything about this game is lazy. And that's also why I might have seemed lethargic throughout this entire review, but I feel lethargic. There's nothing about this game that I feel is worth emphasizing. And it's not even so bad that I'm angry. I played it and felt okay playing it. I didn't enjoy it, but I also didn't hate it. Had I not been making a review about it, I would probably have stopped playing it 3 hours in, 4 hours in. It's not that long, but I think I spent maybe 15 hours on it. Definitely a waste of time. I cannot recommend the game. It's very important just to say that it's not the worst game you'll ever play, but if you played a Slavjank game, and if you know the frustration of playing with bad AI, that is where they try to make up for the shortcomings with just making them very deadly and very bullet spongy, you know how that's not fun. You know how a poorly implemented semi-open world system can be, how boring, though not terribly original in its shittiness, skill system can be. Just it feels like they had to bring it in, so why not have it there? And the story is not really good. The way it functions as a Terminator game, in theory, it could have worked very well, but the execution just isn't there. And all the questions it begs you to ask about Skynet, about the rest of the world, in the Terminator franchise, in the Terminator universe, well, they're not exactly complementary to it, right? They're not really making it any better. The game doesn't really work. It doesn't do its job at being a good Terminator game. It doesn't really do any job at being any kind of good game. And I'm tired of this. I want this video to end. I'm fed up with this game. I want to talk about something better, and I don't know if I'll get that opportunity soon, because at the time I'm filming this, I have only watched up till Terminator Salvation. I still have 2 more Terminator movies to watch, and the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I don't know when the video will come out, if it will come out before or after I've seen all of that, but at this point I really don't want it to get worse than this game, and I'm afraid that it will. If you're also interested in seeing other reviews I've done of games and movies, you can also stay tuned to this channel. I will be uploading sporadically, but I will be uploading things. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this video useful. I wish I had better things to say about this game. I had high hopes going into it, and I really shouldn't have had. Take care.
What was that all about just now?
I've got a meeting with Commander Barron. I'm leaving soon.
Okay. I'm going with you. And don't even try to stop me.
Are you sure?
What's the matter? Don't they let you boys bring dates?